You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
This episode of Mission Log is sponsored by Collide. Got Slack? Got Macs? Get Collide, device security that fixes challenging problems by messaging your users on Slack. Try Collide today. Try it out at collide.com/missionlog. That's KOLIDE.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 440, Phage.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we take a little from here and a little from there in our analysis and discussion of each and every episode of Star Trek, piecing it all together to see what we can learn in the process.
This week, Phage, the one about that really creamy, delicious Greek yogurt.
John, I think you may have misread that. The episode is Phage. You know, the one about the aliens who harvest organs to combat their chronic viral infection.
Oh, well, okay, that is a very different premise indeed. Excuse me, I'll just change my notes a bit.
Yeah, see, there's Phage, which is the way we pronounce this episode, and then there's Phage, which is the yogurt, although technically similar in consistency of substance of their skin, the Vidians.
Oh, okay, look, easy mistake to make. We will get that cleared up, especially if they ever come on our show as a sponsor.
It is delicious, though. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Twitter and Facebook at Mission Log Pod. While you're at it, leave us a review and rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And please remember, your comments can be used on Mission Log or engage on the Roddenberry YouTube channel. And now let's get back to the journey and smoothing out that kind of bumpy-ish yogurt with John Champion with this week's trivia.
All right, thank you. Well, trivia for this week's episode, Phage. We have a story by Timothy DeHaas, and we always love to point out those times that a Star Trek fan was able to use the open submission policy, and this is the second round for Tim. He also had the story credit way back in TNG's fourth season with Identity Crisis, and those are his only two pro writing credits in the industry, but he does have a few acting credits to supplement that as well. The original pitch, incidentally, would have put Tom Paris as the victim of organ theft. The aliens would have taken his heart. We have a teleplay by Sky Dent and Brannon Braga. I'll mention Brannon later in my notes, and honestly, his hands are on so much of Voyager, it's hard to think of any episode that doesn't have his mark. Sky Dent, though, is a new name, and this is her single credit on Star Trek. Sky got her first degree in journalism and worked in newspaper, then pursued an MFA and started leaning toward entertainment and film. She racked up a few TV credits, but also dabbled in publicity, commercial production, and documentary film. She continues to work as an educator and freelance writer. This was directed by Heinrich Kolbe, and here he is returning for Voyager very soon after kicking things off with Caretaker. In fact, there was no break. He wrapped Caretaker and immediately went into his pre-production on this episode. Oh, and a note of correction here. His name was often shortened to Rick, which I stumbled over a while back and called him Rich. Mea culpa. Hey, how about that asteroid? Well, partly it's stock footage and partly it's new shots of the very same asteroid model we saw in the TNG episode, the Pegasus. And on with more of our crew spotlight. This week it's Jennifer Lien as Kes. Jennifer is from Chicago and got her start in acting as a child, even in Shakespeare performances by the age of 13. That led to a more professional pursuit, and by 16 she was moving to New York. TV work also came pretty quickly with a recurring role on the daytime soap Another World, and it was from there that Jennifer also started landing a lot of voice work. She notably appeared in the feature film American History X with Edward Norton. Jennifer's last on-screen credit was in 2001. though she does have a production credit from 2008 on the comedy video Greek Mythology. Now, there will be more to say about Jennifer later in our run and about her role on Voyager. We will save all of that for the appropriate time. And let's talk about our guest stars. Well, welcome back to Martha Hackett playing Seska, who we discussed briefly last week. And time to meet the Vidians, those who are central to the Phage of today's story. First, there's Cully Fredrickson as Dareth. Cully's name may not be as familiar, but his face is unmistakable. That first Vulcan to make contact with Earth in the movie Star Trek First Contact, that's him. Now, that movie came out after this episode, but obviously we already covered it on the show. He can also be found in Bram Stoker's Dracula, Milk, and as a character voice in multiple video games, including 3 Star Wars titles. Then there's Stephen Rappaport as Matura. He's a multi-talented actor, writer, director, singer-songwriter. He's one of those people who has done it all. While this episode is pretty early in his TV career, and he does turn up in some features as well, Stephen has made a name for himself on the international stage. Everything from one-man shows to leading workshops in professional theater companies and at universities. This is Stephen's only Trek appearance.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. We can't find water, but we have mirrors bigger than a starship. This place gets weirder by the week.
Prologue. Voyager is en route to investigate a nearby planetoid, one that Neelix informed Captain Janeway is rich with raw sources of dilithium, which will help alleviate Voyager's current power shortages. On the way to her private dining room for breakfast, Janeway is briefly met by Chakotay, who is supportive of B'Elanna's plan to create a rudimentary dilithium refinery on board the ship. The captain is getting used to fielding ideas from her crew that aren't technically Starfleet standard, but after lamenting what she desires for breakfast and faced with the reality of ration packs, it seems that she's willing to entertain new ideas. Speaking of which, as she soon walks into what was the captain's mess, Janeway is overwhelmed with smoke, fire, and chaos that was once a quiet retreat. And in the middle of it all is Neelix, who has taken it upon himself to convert the captain's dining room into a makeshift galley to serve the crew. And just before Janeway has a chance to make her disapproval crystal clear, Neelix is saved by the comm chime, as Chakotay informs them both that they are approaching the planetoid. On the bridge, Janeway is brought up to speed as the planetoid is rated as Class M, and according to B'Elanna's scans, there are substantial dilithium deposits within between 500 to 1,000 metric tons. As Chakotay assembles his away team members to depart, Neelix falls in line as well and pleads with the captain and Chakotay to join the survey mission, of which he has studied and prepared for all week. With Neelix in tow, the away team beams down to the planet and is met with a cavernous maze of corridors. As the team splits up to survey more area, Neelix is directed by his tricorder readings to an isolated area, where a shadowy figure emerges from what appears to be a holographic image of the cavern wall, and follows Neelix from a distance. Act 1. Chakotay and Kim are growing more confused and frustrated as time passes during their survey. Their tricorders are telling them that there in fact are dilithium deposits where they are surveying, but their own eyes are telling them a much different story, as they aren't finding any visual trace of dilithium at all. Neelix reports in with a similar report as he informs Chakotay of a supposed huge dilithium formation as recorded by his tricorder's sensors. Frustrated with their lack of findings, Chakotay orders Kim and Neelix to pack up their gear and return to Voyager. However, Neelix is still enticed with his tricorder's dilithium scans and something else that his sensors are registering, traces of organic energy. And before Neelix is able to return back to Chakotay's checkpoint, he is fired upon by the same shadowy figure that stalked him moments ago. Hearing Neelix cry out, Chakotay arrives at his location moments later and finds Neelix writhing on the floor and choking for air. When Harry arrives, Chakotay orders their immediate beam out and straight into sickbay, where the doctor scans Neelix and informs Chakotay that Neelix's lungs have been removed. After stabilizing Neelix and assessing the severity of the situation, the doctor informs Captain Janeway that due to their medical limitations, Neelix will die unless his lungs are restored, and to do that, they have to find whoever did this to him. Janeway orders for Tuvok to prepare a heavily armed security detail for her to lead down to the planetoid to do just that. Meanwhile, the Doctor theorizes that the transporter pattern buffer that has the architectural data he needs to construct artificial holographic lungs, complete with the biological compatibility and the capacity to integrate with Neelix's Talaxian physiology, are available. They will be sufficient enough to keep Neelix alive. However, for the holographic lungs to operate efficiently, he will have to be kept in force field stasis and computer-enhanced isolation for what could be the remainder of his natural life, or until his original lungs are recovered for reintegration. Back on the surface of the planetoid, Janeway, Tuvok, and their security team phaser their way through a series of force field generators used to camouflage corridor entryways, and deep within one of the corridors they discover what can only be described as some type of biological organ storage facility. But before they can catalog its contents, Janeway's tricorder picks up the trail of their fleeing life form, which evades capture yet again through another series of rock walls and force fields. Moments later, Chakotay informs Janeway that a ship left the planetoid and immediately went into warp. However, back in sickbay, not all is lost for Neelix as the Doctor activates the program Neelix 1, which slowly beams the structure for Neelix's holographic lungs directly into his chest, reducing his blood oxygen toxicity and allowing Neelix to breathe on his own. The Doctor's plan, so far, is a success. Act 2. Even though he has been thoroughly informed about his current life-changing situation, and even though he has been told that unless his lungs can be recovered and restored back where they belong, Neelix is strangely most concerned with the decor, or lack thereof, of a sickbay ceiling which he now is forced to stare at for an unknown length of time. The Doctor leaves Kes to assist with Neelix's needs, and Neelix in turn succumbs to despair and jealousy, warning Kes about Tom Paris's predatory nature. However, Kes won't hear any more of his overreacting while offering him her support and companionship. Meanwhile, B'Elanna and Tuvok examine a very sophisticated piece of alien technology that they recovered from the base inside the planetoid. It is of unknown origin, but is incredibly sophisticated by their technological standards. It is able to scan and analyze its target's DNA sequence, and then can also be used as a stun weapon to incapacitate that same target, or in this case, its prey. This gravely concerns Janeway, wondering to what end is the purpose of such a device. Perhaps she will soon get her answer as Voyager tracks down the alien escape craft from the planetoid to an artificial asteroid. Tuvok preemptively addresses Janeway's possible course of action as he admits to knowing her that well, and Janeway refuses to disappoint her friend by ordering Paris to pilot Voyager into the asteroid to find Neelix's assailant and the answers they are looking for. Act 3. As Tom gingerly pilots Voyager through the ever-tightening caverns inside the makeshift asteroid, the asteroid itself is causing sensor interference, making it all the more difficult to find the alien ship hiding somewhere inside one of these passageways. In sickbay, Neelix's despair is reaching a critical point as he can no longer bear the incarceration he's in. The Doctor is either unwilling or incapable of providing Neelix any moral or emotional comfort, which only adds to the isolation Neelix is feeling. As he emotionally lashes out at the Doctor and demands for his release, Neelix begins to hyperventilate, which in turn causes the holographic lungs to fail as they fall out of sync with Neelix's breathing pattern. The Doctor is forced to sedate him in order to spare Neelix any further emotional trauma and despair. Meanwhile, Voyager discovers a large and cavernous chamber, which is reflecting both it and the alien ship, much like being in a carnival's house of mirrors. Janeway's idea of firing a phaser at the mirrors rings true with Chakotay, as he suggests tracking a low-energy beam when it hits a solid object, namely the real alien ship. And upon doing so, the aliens, knowing they've been found out, try and escape. But the two life forms aboard the ship are caught and beamed directly to Transporter Room 3 and into Tuvok's custody. Act 4. Upon reaching the transporter room, Captain Janeway finally comes face to face with Neelix's assailants, who appear to be hideously disfigured and grotesque aliens. They introduce themselves as Dareth and Motura of the Vidian Sodality. They further explain that what they did to Neelix was out of dire necessity. Dareth tells Janeway that harvesting healthy organic matter is the only way their species can stave off the Phage, a genetic virus which began ravaging their planet and species over 2 millennia ago. They prefer to do so with freshly deceased beings, but in Motura's case, they needed Neelix's lungs immediately for Motura to survive. And to make matters worse, Neelix's lungs have now been genetically modified to only work within Motura's biology, a process that cannot be reversed. Beside herself with anger, frustration, and sympathy for their plight, Janeway composes herself and accepts that one death cannot serve another, and allows Dareth and Motura to leave freely, with the understanding that if the Vidians try this again to any member of Voyager, they will be met with the deadliest force. Knowing that they have been granted a gift beyond generosity from Captain Janeway, Dareth and Motura offer whatever assistance they are able to give to help alleviate Neelix's dire situation, in the form of their superior medical technology, of which Janeway is well aware just how superior. And after using their medical scanner on Neelix and on the healthy subjects in sickbay, Dareth concludes that they can modify the lungs of whoever decides to be Neelix's organ donor. Kes volunteers, much to Neelix's chagrin, and does so saying that it's a gift for everything he's done for her in their past. After all is said and done, and after Kes and Neelix are resting comfortably after their surgery, the doctor offers Kes a position as his new medical assistant to hopefully replace Tom Paris, and quite possibly as his own way of saying thank you for all of the confidence and belief that she offered him throughout Neelix's medical crisis. The end.
All right, Norman, thank you for the recap. Greatly appreciate it. By the way, this is a rarity in Mission Log history where the same host does the recap back-to-back for a number of scheduling reasons, travel reasons, etc. This is 1 week where we did that, and then we'll be back to our alternating the next time. Until such time in the future, we have to do it again. So
you never know.
You never know.
Flexibility. Thy name is podcast.
It's our show. We can do what we want. All right. Well, let's get right into what we saw in this episode. And right away, what I didn't see, but I could see it in Janeway's mind's eye, Eggs Benedict with asparagus, a side of strawberries and cream. Ooh, she's speaking right to me. I appreciate it so much. And so sad that we didn't get to see that. And we have the reference back to the ration packs, which we know were a staple in DS9 years. But now something that's very different. We now have Neelix the chef. He has just taken over that room.
So, with the technology that we have, how many times did you stop and pause and kind of take a look at what actual foods that they were trying to use to look like alien foods? I think there was like blue spaghetti like we saw in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country somewhere.
Yeah, so I think there was that, and I did freeze frame a few times. First of all, live flame on a set. You know, that is a big deal when you do that. Obviously, the smoke was probably generated. You know, you had some fog machines there, but live flame on a set is a big deal. It looked like, if you're looking at the screen on your right, he's torching some edamame in almost like a grill pan. It's a little weird. I will say this, you know, there's so much Neelix food to come. Right away, I do not love the chef outfit. You know, because it's a little costumey. It's a little whimsical. Like Neelix already plays a bit of comic relief. We'll get into that as well in the notes and in our discussion. But I feel like stuff like that, where you pick a costume that really telegraphs to the audience, that never ages well. You know?
I think that's like something in the 90s where they just said, you know what, let's go for it. Like Jake's entire wardrobe on Deep Space Nine just doesn't age well, right? But it worked then. So we're kind of like stuck in this time capsule here. I liked that the open flame was a thing because it showed, like, obviously there was smoke in the captain's quarters or the captain's dining room, but I was really concerned that there's a lot of prosthetic that Ethan is wearing.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Latex.
Yeah, right.
Highly flammable stuff. Right?
Well, and just on a set in general, there's stuff everywhere. So, yeah, got to get the fire marshal in for that one.
So, for all of you scientists out there, Dr. Aaron McDonald, please, I'd love for you to be able to speak up on this. Is a rogue planetoid, oid, just a baby rogue planet? I mean, what does the oid mean? Is it like Ito in Spanish, where it's like little?
Yep.
Or is it like, are they just playing fast and loose with sciencey stuff like Vulcan and Vulcanian, back in the day?
Here's the thing. I'll give you a little hint here. And real scientists, please also chime in. But my layman's understanding, like asteroid and planetoid are almost but not quite interchangeable terms. You're talking about a small body which is in orbit of a central star. Okay, in this case, it's rogue, so it could be anywhere. But yeah, a planetoid is just a small little planet out there. Not big enough to really be considered a planet, but those are kind of vague terms. There's not a hard cutoff there.
Okay, so if I know this is like a rabbit hole that you
can't wait.
Folks out there don't really want to go down. But so you have a planet and a smaller planet called a planetoid. So if an asteroid is called asteroid, does that mean a larger asteroid? It's called an aster?
Well, if it's really, really tiny, it's an asterisk.
Oh, when her chicken dinner cooked by Neelix on it.
Let's move on.
On the the planetoid, in the caverns, I love the wrist-mounted flashlights.
I dig those so much.
Love those, right? So they just make sense if you're going to tricorder something or if you need to phaser something. It's right there, points like fingers, which is really smart. So here's, okay, people, keep score on this scene. Neelix is on the ground. His lungs have been extracted. Kim and Chakotay are flanking him on the ground. When they are beamed into sickbay, they are beamed exactly onto the medical bed, Neelix, and then Chakotay and Harry Kim are standing, flanking him on the perfectly placed Neelix on the medical bed.
Yep.
How does that happen?
Yeah. So the one thing that I thought is kind of a missed opportunity in some way, because you could actually say to the transporter chief, like, okay, beam up the two of us, but the person who is sick, who is prone here on the ground, beam them up and hold them in the pattern buffer for just a minute until we figure out what we actually need to do here. Like, you can actually buy some time, I was thinking,
That's a good point. Why not just keep him in the pattern buffer?
Yeah, you could.
If he's severely injured.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So much for me to say about this. I have many notes later on that. But
I bet. Yeah. Okay. Speaking of that, and going to sickbay and this whole introduction of the problem here, there are many scenes where you have the holographic doctor sitting down at a desk in front of a computer terminal. Why is the doctor using a computer? He is the computer. The computer is he.
That is interesting.
Like, doesn't that slow things down?
Well, I guess is it because I have so much to say about that too later on. I don't want to steal from my notes. But the thing is that, the doctor is supposed to be this physical calming presence for a patient. That's why he appears, right? So that he can be this figure where people can turn to and say, doctor, what do I do? As opposed to, computer, what do I do? So maybe that's the case here. I understand what you're saying. I completely agree with you because, you're just creating a medium of which it's slowing down the process of inputting information. Sure, and I get that. Especially when you have all this tricorder stuff. The tricorder is like the workhorse so far. It's like the workhorse prop of this show. So many tricorders going off. All the
go
time.
Back to Caretaker. Like, so many tricorders in that episode. Yeah.
I need to get one of those tricorder
pretty great.
props. They're gorgeous. Yeah.
I will say that there was a missed opportunity here with the title. They could have just called it Neelix's Lungs to bookend Spock's brain. I thought that would have been a really nice, why not?
2-pack DVD collector set.
Right.
Let's make it happen. Right.
Exactly.
Like all the body parts, just kind of like Star Trek body parts, DVD collector set, Ultimate Edition 4K rescan.
Yeah. There you go. And since there will be talk about holography and technology in this episode, it's a very novel use that they come up with. I like that they do this. Although heart-lung machines are kind of an old technology at this point, so it's not out of the question that they would have some other solution. But it was a very novel idea to introduce this technology into the situation. But I do want to refer people back to, we very recently had an email from a listener that we addressed in a supplemental episode asking, like, what about using the transporter for surgery, for plastic surgery? And here we are, not plastic surgery, necessary life-saving surgery, but here you got basically your transporter being able to go, ooh, here, look, we're going to put a holographic construct inside this body, And hey, let's not lose sight of our other characters in the episode, because obviously there's so much more to talk about with what's happening medically in this. There is a little exchange that you must have caught. Tuvok basically telling the captain, like, I know you so well that I know you're about to do something foolish. And it really harkened back to like a Spock Kirk or Spock McCoy kind of relationship, but played new. And I really like that. I think there's a nice dynamic to be found there. Yeah.
Exactly. I love when the Doctor and Tom Paris are teching the tech to create the holographic lungs. I mean, I think that's a really interesting way of, just explaining the exposition of what's happening to the audience.
Yeah.
But the whole thing with the Doctor saying that I'm using the transporter matrix to get exact specifications for Neelix's lungs. So if that's the case, why can't they replicate Neelix's lungs, aside from the plot device of saying so?
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, and it would prevent us from having a really important, fun moment, that great slap.
Great slap. Yeah.
Good stuff. Yeah.
I wonder if Robbie was like prepared for that slap over time. Did they have to do more than one take? That'd be interesting to ask.
Yeah.
Maybe he commented on it on Delta Flyers, on their podcast.
Could be.
So the whole thing with like Neelix, like looking up, because he's pretty much stabilized and isolated in that iron lung, like looking up and saying, like, really got to do something about the ceilings because they're terrible. Yeah. That's a true thing, right? I remember, like, sometimes when I went to the dentist, they just had very blank ceilings, like nothing on the ceiling. And it's like, a little personality would help in people's, kind of like assuage their fears and their anxiety if there's like a nice kind of painting or something to look at.
Yeah. There's so much to be said about Neelix's journey in this, and that played as a very real moment. It played as it was fun, but it also played very real. He's got to get his mind on something else, so I don't blame him there. Man, the Doctor, Cass says to him, I thought Tom Paris was assigned to assist you. Like I said, no one to assist me. I mean, the Doctor throwing shade right away. Just right away in this little relationship. Yeah.
I mean, he's pretty consistently cold, like even for like a holographic program. Yeah. But I think that's done specifically so that we can start seeing kind of like a change and an evolution of his character as a character. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Yeah. I think that... like the contrast and comparison between like where Neelix was at the beginning to where Neelix like is like later on towards the episode, and kind of like the terror that he's going through. Ethan is really, really like flexing like how good of an actor he really is.
Yep.
Throughout this entire episode, and I think that was a very amazing scene for him. Seska's wearing gold now.
Yep.
With Martha Hackett's return. She was wearing blue before, now she's wearing gold.
Yep. And speaking of visuals, the Vidians. Wow. That makeup is excellent. And it's probably not the most complex makeup. I mean, you basically build a whole head appliance, and there are others that are, many multiple parts and have to be really seamless. This, you can kind of let the seams work for you because they're falling apart. But really gruesome and original and very, very effective.
It also reminded me like what was it, the Son we're going through?
Yes, in Insurrection, yeah.
But just a far more accelerated version of kind of like their own doings. The Phage in and of itself it's a really complex moral issue, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that soon. But if the Vidians, if they were as civilized as they claimed to be, like poets and scientists and people of high culture, isn't morality the better part of a civilized culture's philosophy, as opposed to doing what they did? Or am I jumping like too far into?
You might be jumping a little ahead.
Point.
Yeah, because I think this is part of the heart of the discussion of the episode. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
But I know you appreciate a good Dan Aykroyd. So the alien device, is it better than a Basmatic? It slices, it dices, it scans, it paralyzes, and removes organs with microscopic precision and more.
Well done.
All right.
Bravo.
Because it does all that with that technology.
Bravo. You get bonus points today. Man, I this might also be jumping ahead a little bit, but I got to say, Kate Mulgrew is perfect when playing the combination of anger and sympathy. That is a tough scene to carry off, and she did it admirably. So maybe more to say about that as we wrap things up today. Mm-hmm.
She's also flexing a lot, and she's flexing her understanding, her immediate understanding of who Janeway is in this episode after, 4 episodes?
Yeah.
So much range, so much understanding, just so much quality in that acting, and like solidifying where Janeway's headspace is, like in all of this. I thought that it's just amazing to watch her.
Speaking of characters who are growing, really nice to see Kes get her assignment the way she does. And her relationship with the Doctor is really solid and getting more so over time. So I like seeing that.
Yeah, the relationship, I think that started like all the way back in Parallax, when they started talking about like treating him as a character. It's a nice foundation, and something that we didn't get with Vic Fontaine coming so late into Deep Space Nine, referencing himself as a light bulb, because that he was so much more than that.
Yeah, exactly. I do have to wonder, as we close out our observations on this episode shortly, how well does a humanoid adapt to having only one lung? I mean, we are talking about alien physiology here. My dad, the lung doctor, not within audible range right now, so I'll have to ask him later, but I just thought, like, wow, they're waking up from this transplant surgery, and I feel a little lightheaded. It'll pass.
Take a couple of these.
Yeah.
It'll be okay.
Yeah.
With all the technology that's in Voyager, you have so much great set design and so much great production value. But did you notice the egg crate styrofoam technology that lines Neelix's iron lung?
I did.
I'm like,
yes.
That's special effects, people.
Yeah, that was, hey, you got to keep him comfortable and keep him from breaking. And by the way, just going to suggest, since Voyager has a supercomputer for a doctor, and the Vidians have vastly superior medical technology, maybe a download before they leave? Just a suggestion.
Got your nose. A fun game to play with babies. A bad game to play with Lieutenant Carey. A worse game to play with Vidians.
We will get right back to Phage, but first, a word from this week's sponsor.
Collide sends employees important, timely, and relevant security recommendations for their Linux, Mac, and Windows devices right inside Slack. Collide is perfect for organizations that care deeply about compliance and security, but don't want to get there by locking down devices to the point where they become unusable.
All right, so here's what you can do. You can avoid frustrating your employees because Collide educates them about security and device management while directing them to fix important problems. And all you have to do is you visit collide.com/missionlog to sign up today. That's KOLIDE.com/missionlog. Enter your email when prompted to receive your free Collide gift bundle after trial activation. Now, at Collide, everybody knows that end users are IT admins' most significant untapped resources and the key to solving the most challenging to fix security issues, including, let's see, I'll just rattle a few off the top of my head, instructing developers to set passphrases on unencrypted SSH keys. Oh, and here's one more, finding plain text two-factor backup codes and teaching end users how to store them securely. Or how about this old chestnut? Convincing employees to uninstall evil browser extensions that may sell their browser history.
We know about those. Browser extensions are bad. Right?
No good. And you don't want your employees to have them either. Come on.
Wonderfully articulated, John. And those are just some of the many use cases not solved by locking down devices. So you can try Collide with all of its features on an unlimited number of devices for free for 14 days, no credit card required. So try it out at collide.com/missionlog. That's KOLIDE.com/missionlog.
All right, in the last segment, Norman, you mentioned the two words, the combination of words that perked my ears right up because, well, it was isotropic restraint. No, it wasn't. It was the iron lung, a fascinating bit of technology, now fortunately out of use, but a critical piece of technology nonetheless, and interesting if people haven't seen photos of that. You essentially had the patient from the neck down enclosed in this long cylinder that could compress and decompress enough to get them to take a breath. But that patient is essentially trapped, laying on their back, and very often they would have a mirror angled above the neck opening there so they could interact and they could actually kind of see the world around them a little bit. So that was the first thing that I thought of, seeing Neelix in his position. Maybe I thought of that because, well, like I mentioned before, my dad, the lung doctor, this is something that I knew about from probably, a very young age. And you can't but absolutely feel terrible for Neelix in this situation. It's always a tough thing in a show like Star Trek where you have your introduced cast / crew who are there for the duration, and that danger isn't really danger in some respect. They're going to be back for the next episode. But when you can build some sympathy for a character who's in a rough situation, that really relies on that actor selling that moment. And I thought that Ethan Phillips did a brilliant job of doing exactly that. And I would go back to that moment that you said about him looking at the ceiling. It was the appropriate amount of humor for a really dire situation. And that is a very realistic thing to do. People who are in a tough situation.
Gallows humor. Yeah, oftentimes will focus on the inappropriate, the non sequitur, whatever, just to break the tension in the room. And it's a lovely bit of dialogue played out perfectly, and a lovely bit of dialogue that is capped off by, I believe, this may be our second of the holographic doctor using the old McCoy-ism. Or I'm a doctor, not a blank, and this time decorator. Yeah. Lovely. Thought that was perfect. But Neelix is, he's going through some stuff. And what's interesting is that he has been working at his best to integrate himself into the crew. And you can talk about how realistic or how inappropriate it is that he just sort of takes over a room and the captain is unaware of this. And, whatever, that's kind of besides the point. But, because then you arrive at the moment that there is an accident, he is restrained, and he has this very understandable reaction of helplessness followed by jealousy. There's anger in there. There are all these emotions that feel absolutely real for all of us watching him. Sure. And bringing up the iron lung, when I saw Neelix isolated in that restraint, you couldn't help, if you're a certain age, if you're a certain generation, you can't help but make that comparison to the polio victims of the 1950s, where the iron lung came into prominence. As a matter of fact, I think that there was a documentary not too long ago saying that the last of the iron lungs is failing because they don't make the parts for it anymore. And there is one polio victim left from the 1950s or 1960s that's still in an iron lung. So there's also a parallel that I drew from Tom Cruise's performance as Ron Kovic from Born on the 4th of July, where he was staring at his own filth because they kept him in one position for too long. Think about the psychosis, the psychological damage that happens to a patient when they aren't stimulated with the things that stimulate normal life, that give them excitement and joy, living. So that's this. I know that's played off for comedy sometimes with Ethan and the way he portrayed Neelix at a certain point, in his incarceration, if you will. But it's about what is living. What is happening to Neelix that has stolen away the zest for a Talaxian's version of life, their attitude towards living. I mean, think about it. Is living just merely just staying alive? Hoping for the chance that a cure can be found? I mean, people are kept in comas for that particular reason. People are kept on breathing machines for that particular reason, because they have suffered this catastrophic illness or catastrophic accident, in this case, Neelix's lungs.
Yeah.
But it's a very real thing that he's going through, that he has been deprived of what makes living worth living.
You must have, because I thought of it too, and that's going back to Worf's accident in TNG.
Yes.
Everybody remembers, he has the barrel, the stuff in the cargo bay hits him, breaks his back, and then he is asking for he's asking for euthanasia. He's asking to end his life. Of course, the doctor won't do it, but it's partly, significantly cultural for him, but it also is this feeling of helplessness, and he is no longer the person that he was. And it is this very interesting question that we get into. It's like, well, in Neelix's case, this is a very short period of time, but if he's faced with even the potential reality of just laying there on this medical bed, laying there in this futuristic version of an iron lung for the rest of his existence, how long does he want that existence to go on? How long, what artificial means could keep him alive if that life isn't to him worth living? Who gets to make that call? So we didn't really spend too much time on that in this episode, but the emotion was there. You could tell that was the thing that they were at least allowing that character to go through to some extent, And that was this this interesting thing about the doctor-patient relationship and the ethics involved. So you have Neelix, who is vulnerable and going through all of the legitimate, valid emotions over what's happened to him, the trauma, the physical trauma, the emotional trauma. I love how they let that play out. And we can also get into the other side of the medical, ethical issues going in here, the Vidians. Desperate to find life, and you can kind of put life in finger quotes there, however they can suit themselves. Like whatever it is, they will grasp anything, including violating their own, maybe ancient at this point, set of values and ethics, just to stay alive, even if that quality of life may not really be worth living. Yeah.
The ethics involved in this equation is staggering, because they are basically saying, the Vidians are saying, or at least these two are. We don't know how many more are there out there. We don't know if their values are the same or if they're more extreme or less extreme. I'm sure that we'll find out in time. But these two are saying that if we don't appropriate, salvageable biological tissue, then we will cease to exist. What gives them the right to do that? That is committing murder, right? If Neelix was the only person on that planet, on that planetoid, that was there looking around, stumbled across this ship, and then his lungs were extracted, he didn't have a Hawaii team to go and put him in a bio bed and have this advanced technology to keep him alive. He would have died. Yeah. Right? So what gives the Vidians the right to do that, to perpetuate the life of their own species, that nature itself, not a chemical, biological weapon or war, but nature has deemed them to suffer? That's part of the natural evolution of their species right now.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. They are an advanced species, and they do have great medical technologies, presumably which they have had to develop over all this time, but they can't quite crack this one. They can't quite get to the point that their replacement organs would be viable for a long period. They still have to get replaced over time. And it has made them resort to this terrible, terrible choice. And that's what's so interesting, because the question in this episode is, how far is too far? We all understand the need and the desire to survive and thrive. And we all understand that sometimes there are extreme circumstances. But at what point are you violating the worst possible ethics in order to just do that, in order to just stay alive one more day? Because remember, these are all very short-term solutions for their problems. None of this is long-term.
But I guess the big question is that we're applying human morality to the Vidians' plate. Do the Vidians see it that way?
Well, we're given little clues. We don't spend a whole lot of time with them, but we are given little clues about the sort of the inner lives and the history of the Vidians. That you talk about the one who is a sculptor, and they have this sense of art and imagination and relationship. They do have some sense of this, and therefore you have to assume that they place some value on life and understand that that value applies to other lives.
That's what I think.
Again, but they've gotten to a point. That point came that said, no, but we can also violate this. And we can also force this on other people because it keeps us alive. We're placing ourselves higher than the others. I thought it's an interesting premise here. They're the desperate measures to face a medical threat. By the way, a virus that wipes out thousands per day. That is what they have been faced with over a long period of time. And he said it perfectly. It must be impossible for you to understand how any civilized people could come to this. Yeah, but also no. And that's the scary part of that equation. Because it is a yes, but it also is a no, because historically and even in the present day as we record this, we know that there are people who would go to terrible lengths, who you feel like would, could, and should be civilized. But if it just gets them through the next point, just gets them to succeed that next time, then they would violate their own standards in order to do that.
I mean, there's definitely, a range of choices that need to be made, and obviously there are some that are extreme, like it's either going to be me or you. The thing is that I can understand that doing it to other Vidians. I don't understand doing that to species that they've never even met before. That they feel that they have the right, in order for us to survive, we have the right. Remember that? I think that's the operative phrase here. We have the right to be able to take what we want in order for us to survive, whether or not we're going to survive long term, just for one more day, one more hour, one more minute. We have the right to be able to cull the masses out there in space in order for us to be able to serve our needs.
Well, wait, don't you think that's easier for them, though, to do that to an unknown being than to a known being? I mean, if something completely or someone completely unknown to you appears out of nowhere, okay, well, wouldn't that be an easier target for you than maybe the species or the however many other they've encountered that maybe they've gotten to know a little bit?
I mean, it's hard to say. It plays into the morality of, am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to make this choice to a perfect stranger who has a family of their own, who has loved ones of their own, who has a life? That's what they took away from Neelix.
But I think it's easy for them to make that call because they can sort of play dumb at that point. Well, we don't know. I mean, look, this is just a being that appeared out of nowhere. We don't know if they have a family. We don't know if they've got loved ones. We don't know their value on life. So we're just going to take what we think is ours. Well, they're establishing their own sort of ethical code there.
That's a justification for this particular species. They're trying to reframe their morality in a way where they said, well, we have to do this in order to survive. So if people can understand that, then they'll be on board with our decision-making process. And that kind of like goes to like where Janeway was at the end, where she says, you're forcing me to do the exact same thing that you did. And I think, you know what? If I agree, I would have agreed with her if she did, take those lungs back from that Vidian. Yes.
Really?
Yes, because it's not fair that she's put in this situation.
But the lungs won't work. But the lungs won't work.
I didn't know that at first.
I get it.
But the decision the decision of her doing that, I have absolutely no problem with, period. Because it's not the decision that she made. It was a decision she was forced to make. There's a distinction, right?
Yeah.
The Vidians caused her to lose a valued member of her crew. They did this to him. She didn't do it to them.
I think we might be having a very different conversation if we knew that the lungs were viable. Once the Vidians had altered them, once they had actually used them, they essentially transposed them to a compatible, biology that would work with theirs, and couldn't be given back to Neelix. I think it'd be a very different conversation if that were not the case. If the lungs were just the lungs and they were in the Vidian's body and they could be taken away, then you kind of come up with this really twisted version of the trolley problem. Does Janeway allow through her action one to die in order to save the other, or through her inaction allow one to live so that and the other to die? But they threw this wrench in the works, and the wrench in the works is to say, like, well, we're already using them. They can't be reformatted. They can't be reused.
But didn't they admit that after she said that, I can't murder you to save him?
That's a good question. I thought in the course of the story that maybe that came earlier.
Yeah, because when they beamed them over, she said that I am left with the same choice you made, whether to commit murder to save a life, which would be murdering the Vidian to take the lungs back to save Neelix, or allow my own crewman to die while you breathe air through his lungs. I'm like, because...
Okay, but there's a difference. You're allowing a death, or you are causing a murder.
She's not murdering anyone. She's the after effect.
Well, but she's the one saying, like, no, you're standing here alive before me using those lungs.
Right.
If I take those from you by force, you die.
They didn't belong to him anyway.
Well, that's very true. I agree.
No, I understand.
But where we are right now, where we are in the position right now is that Neelix is hanging on by a thread. The Vidian is alive, but only because he stole what wasn't his. But that's the problem that Janeway faces. You either allow a death or you cause a death.
Right. But that's not fair for her to put the blame on herself, saying this is an impossible situation for me to be in. It's kind of like a mini Kobayashi Maru, but it's not, because
there we go.
Her responsibility is to Neelix, not to the Vidians. And we know that if Neelix got his lungs back, he would live a Talaxian's life. The Vidians are just buying time.
Yeah.
Right?
By the way, that's our other missed opportunity for the title game.
What's that?
How Neelix got his lungs back. All right, let's. I want to move on a little bit because I think we have to talk about Kes and the Doctor, because I know that was a point for you, and it's one of the most interesting developments out of all of this is Kes, which we mentioned before in previous episodes. Kes seems to be the only one with even an interest in identifying with and relating to the Doctor as a being, as opposed to just a tool, a piece of technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I like about the development here, and then that was from Parallax, and we saw a little bit, in the episodes in between, with Time and Again.
Time and Again.
And what I like about it is that they're establishing a storyline which they tried to establish with, say, Nog and Vic, and It's Only a Paper Moon in Deep Space Nine, where you have this opportunity for a character that's going to be much more than just a series of photons and force fields, where there's an actual opportunity for a character to grow past their initial... Well, their initialization, actually, when it comes to the EMH. I'm going to get a little bit more into that in Morals and Meanings and Messages, because I really do think that they're establishing the opportunity for character growth from a character that becomes that representation, that external representation of the Roddenberry Star Trek ideal of the human condition, studying the human condition through the Doctor. And I like that the Doctor and Kes are having these moments, because Kes, interestingly enough, is becoming that counselor character, not just for Neelix in this episode, but even for the Doctor in this case. And the Doctor even blames himself, saying, like, I'm supposed to be the Doctor, the counselor, the nurse, all wrapped up into one. But Kes was like, hey. calm down. All right, don't overburden yourself. There are plenty of responsibilities to go around. Let's just figure out how you're going to evolve past this program that you are.
Yeah.
Because you, as she says, you do learn, don't you?
Yeah, right. Well, see, that was great. That was one of the hallmarks of that, is recognizing that the Doctor has this capacity to learn, this manufactured intelligence, can learn and adopt new traits. And it really is one of the most positive and interesting aspects of Kes, is that she's clearly very smart. She's clearly very insightful. She certainly grounds the equation of her and Neelix, no question about it. But at the same time, her level of innocence is one that it's sort of like, before a person is taught a prejudice about someone or something else. So whereas everybody else on that ship can look at the Doctor and go, oh, well, I know where he comes from. He comes from, coded lines in binary that are projected as so many photons and a magnetic field that allows me to slap or not slap him.
That was great.
But it's so interesting to just remove all of that and being able to look at a character like the Doctor through somebody else's eyes entirely. I think that's one of the hallmarks of how well their relationship is written.
Mm-hmm.
These guys have a terrible disease? Quick, let's beam them up and let them exhale that into our air circulation system.
So, Phage is delicious, John.
Yeah,
I just wanted to let you know.
It is.
It does come with... it has an aftertaste of heavy morality and universal ethics. But overall, though, if you get the low calorie count, then it won't be too heavy on your own morality when you're done enjoying your Phage in the morning. But let's get to Phage.
Okay, because those are some of my favorite tastes that go together. So yeah,
especially with honey.
Yeah.
Especially with honey. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So as we do with all of our episodes here on Mission Log, we look at the structure of the episode, and then we have our observations and we have our discussion, of which it was great, really, really, really great. And I'm sure there are going to be lots of messages about that. But now we look to the end of the episode with does the episode hold up for us? And then we get into the morals, meanings, and messages, which I'm sure will even spark even more messages and emails, especially for Engage, if you haven't sent us emails about that yet. But let's get to the episode. Does it hold up for you, John? What did you think?
So it's funny, jokingly I mentioned Spock's brain earlier, but I'll come back to it here, because that is a silly episode with a silly premise. But when you stop and look at what's going on, there are some great ideas about bodily autonomy and about the needs of the many, which we didn't even get into here. But with Phage, I kind of dismissed it on my first viewing, but for myself, because I had to, and anybody in the audience who might be dismissing it, go back and watch it again. There are so many great moments, and there are so many intriguing ideas at play here. Many things like about this episode. First of all, you don't even have to read the opening credits to know that Brandon Braga had a hand in it. Among the many things that he's good at, he does have a certain penchant for injecting a little horror into his writing, and there's something immediately creepy about aliens harvesting organs. It's one of those episodes that makes you ask, is it Star Trek with horror in it, or is it horror with a Star Trek setting? And I'm okay with playing with the Star Trek format in that way. And look at this. Look how early it is in the series, and we keep getting this good character focus. Neelix can be the object of fan ire because he can be a bit of the silly misfit, and therefore by default the comedy goes there a lot. But already we're getting a real sense of sympathy for him too. There's depth. There's an emotional life. He has these deeper, complex emotions rather than just being the goofy guy in the kitchen. And we're getting good stuff out of the Doctor that is really, in lesser hands, could be very tricky, not just for Star Trek, but anywhere to do. And I think we're doing it well here. Now, typically our characters in Trek don't criticize each other or make fun of each other. It doesn't wear well, comes across as very false and forced, but the Doctor is so unique he can make those snarky comments and we accept it. And I don't know if he was written like that from the original concept, but in most places, if you've got, look at a generic science fiction script, and it's like, put in the wisecracking robot here, you're doomed from the get-go, but they've found this balance here with the Doctor early on. And they've allowed him also to deal with the idea of existence and growth, which is great. From a technical end, I feel like the trapped in the mirror sequence, which we wouldn't even talk about, it felt a little like, well, we need a cool special effect here, but it was well done. It was kind of like getting a B-plot without it really being a B-plot. And finally, ultimately, we got a Janeway speech.
Hell yeah, we did.
Yeah, baby. You're right, man. Yeah. She lays a smackdown on some aliens, and I appreciate it so much. And it worked. It put the fear of God into the Vidians and even made one change his mind, which by default then the other had too. That was a great moment, and it was performed so well by Kate. So overall, and I leaned this way in the last two stories that we covered. I don't know if the plot itself will necessarily stick with me, but the characters keep getting strong moments, and there are memorable aspects to all of this. It holds up. I'm not sure it ascends the ranks of truly like the greatest Star Trek just yet, but it is, it's getting up there. They hit so many of the marks in this. They balanced the drama with humor. They effectively raised tension, and they presented us with a challenging encounter with an alien that turned out to be not what it was from our initial sort of conception. So good job. I'm curious to see, maybe reflecting on this episode as we get deeper into Voyager, how this one holds up. What about you, my friend?
Well, I'm going to actually reiterate a lot of the same sentiments and maybe some of the same technical notes, because at first viewing, it's a very good, very standard episode. Mm-hmm. Nothing really kind of stood out to me at first viewing, but then you watch it a little bit more, as we do with mission log format, and then we go and seek out the deeper meanings and the morals and meanings and messages. And when I watched it multiple times, it became probably the most consistent episode that I've seen in Voyager so far, in the handful of episodes that we've done. And even though, as you mentioned before, it borrows heavily from the science fiction / horror genre with some very healthy doses of tropish horror movie beats, right? A lot of the gotcha moments,
right,
replete with, the gotcha cut to commercials. What really stands out in this episode are the characterizations and how the cast and how the crew have gelled so quickly. There are some great interpersonal moments that really stood out. In particular, the scenes with Robert Picardo and Ethan Phillips as the Doctor and Neelix. They were at odds. Neelix needed a comforting voice and a counselor to get him through the trauma and the terror that he's going through. That scene where he demands to be released from his iron lung. This is great acting. Mm-hmm. This is great acting, great stuff from these characters so early on. I mean, Ethan's performance is... It kind of encapsulates where these two are as characters, where the Doctor is maybe overly clinical and sanitary and very cold, versus someone who's so emotionally all over the spectrum. I think it's just great that these two are together to have this moment. Let's say that other character moments in this episode, like Tuvok saying that he knows the captain better than she realizes.
This is a great moment. Yeah.
Great moment. Yeah. And that kind of makes you kind of scratch your head and say, what does he know? What are these experiences that they've had together for him to be able to know her like this? Tom actually cares about Keston, not in an over-sexualized Lothario-ish manner. He actually cares in a way where Neelix was jealous because maybe Neelix doesn't know how to care for Kes in that very specific way. I liked Chakotay's consistency to back Torres' play with her whole idea of a dilithium cracking facility inside the ship. He's like, hey, think outside the box. We're not Federation. We're going to do it our way. These are these great... They're small, but they're interconnected moments that build this incredible tapestry that ties the crew and the cast together. Overall, though, it's it's solid. It's a solid episode that has a solid story, and it didn't wrap up in that tidy Next Generation kind of way where Neelix wakes up with his lungs intact. No, he has one of Kes's lungs. One of the ultimate examples of sacrifice and love that she has shown to anyone on the ship. In fact, this is, probably why she and Neelix are together, because she is so empathetic towards his needs. So, but yeah, it's not like she's okay, he's okay, the doctor's okay, everyone's okay. No, there's a scar that has been laid between them.
Yeah.
That scar tissue that's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be problematic in their relationship or not. So I thought that was great. And yes, hell yes, the Janeway speech. Hell yes, the Janeway speech.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
talking
talking
about. More of that, please. Yeah. Quite good. All right. Well, that brings us then to the, morals, meanings, messages. And, you're going to take the lead here. I know you got more notes here than I do on this. But the thing that I respect in this is that there is the attempt at understanding. Like what the Vidians have done is reprehensible. It is unethical. It is immoral. It is a crime in every sense that we would look at it. And yet there is this attempt in the script to allow us and allow the characters who are there in the room with them to try to see the why. Who are they really? I mean, look, they are designed to look horrendous to us, but what we have to do is try to see the people who they are, not just the horror of who they are. And then I'm going to go back to this line again that I picked up earlier. It must be impossible for you to understand how any civilized people could come to this. Yes, and yet no. That will always and forever be our challenge, is that anytime we come across a problem that seems too insurmountable, they would have to compromise our ideals and our ethics and our values. We are one step closer to being those civilized people who turn into the monsters that we do not want to be, or we say that we don't want to be. Janeway's faced with a terrible dilemma. And she realizes where her back is against the wall. And to me, you and I may disagree on this, to me she makes the right ethical decision in letting the Vidians go, because there is no alternative. And in every case, the ends do not justify the means. But I have a feeling, Norman, this is something that we may come back to even further down the road in some of Janeway's decision-making.
Actually, John, I agree with you. I agree that she made the right ethical decision. I'm just saying that if she chose differently, I would have supported that too. Based solely on the predicament that she was put in. So I can see and support her going either direction, because one, it's the Starfleet way, but the two, I think it's the human way. To react in a certain kind of like, it's not my fault that you put me in this situation. I got to do the right thing, and the right thing is to save my crewmen. All that aside, though, I think that the real meaning of this episode is what we just talked about earlier at the end of discussion with Kes and the EMH. And I think that we're establishing what I think is going to be a far greater story, and an examination of one of, say, Starfleet's, but more importantly, one of Star Trek's fundamental principles, and that's to explore and seek out new life. A little bit later, I'd like to steer the attention of our discussion here to one of Star Trek's finest moments, the end of A Measure of a Man, where Data is on trial for proof of his sentient existence. But let's look at, say, how Kes is, how she's approaching the EMH, the Doctor. Is he technology to her? Is he property? Is he just a series of photons and force fields, like Vic alludes to? Or, to Kes, is the Doctor capable of true sentience? She asks him, how does a real doctor learn to deal with a patient's emotional problems anyway? And the Doctor says they learn from experience. And Kes asks him, aren't you capable of learning? And the Doctor says, I have the capacity to accumulate and process data, yes. And then Kes says, then I guess you'll just have to learn like the rest of us. And this is what I love about...
You're a real doctor. Look.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, you're a real boy. The Pinocchio syndrome applies.
Yeah.
Right here, the desire to be real. So this is where I love where Kes is at her writing, where they're writing her. She feels like a counselor, as I said before. She feels like, someone that the Doctor can talk to. Now, going back to the Next Generation's measure of a man, which I believe is still one of the most defining moments in Star Trek history.
Sure.
The debate of what is considered or not considered as sentient life. This is where John and I are going to do something a little fun.
All right. I can't wait.
So I've put on the writer's hat in a good way. In a good way, people. Imagine, if you will, John and I reinterpreting Captain Picard's original argument for Data, but replace Data with the EMH. So, John, the script is in front of you. If you would be so kind to perform the role of Dr. Maddox and now the Doctor.
Okay.
And I'm not going to do this in his voice, in Patrick Stewart's voice. That's impossible. So I'm just going to do my best here to allude to this.
It's the only shred of respect we have on this show.
Commander, would you enlighten us? What is required for sentience?
Intelligence, self-awareness, consciousness.
Prove to the court that I am sentient.
It's absurd. We all know you're sentient.
So I'm sentient, but the emergency medical hologram is not.
That's right.
Why? Why am I sentient?
Well, you're self-aware.
That's the second of your criteria. Let's deal with the first, intelligence. Is the holographic doctor intelligent?
Yes, it has the ability to learn and understand and cope with new situations.
Like this hearing?
Yes.
What about self-awareness? What does that mean? Why am I self-aware?
Because you are conscious of your existence and actions. You're aware of yourself and your own ego.
Doctor, what are you doing now?
I am taking part in a legal hearing to determine my rights and status. Am I a person or property?
And what's at stake?
My right to choose. Perhaps my very life.
My rights. My status. My right to choose. My life. It seems reasonably self-aware to me, Commander. I'm waiting. So, in that exchange, the way I see it, we are once again where Star Trek is at its best. When it examines the complex issues of morality, as we see with how Kes addresses and treats the Doctor, as if he is an actual sentient being. This is where we, unfortunately, only barely scratch the surface with Vic Fontaine, and I hope we see that there's more of this kind of introspection and moral self-examination with the Doctor, challenged by Kes, to determine a greater truth about redefining life as we know it. What is more Star Trek at its core than that?
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, The Cloud.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Adam Brusky, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, John Mann, Mike Richards, and Mike Schabel. No, really, here, you can have your nose back. I had no idea it was detachable. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.